Okay, rolling.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. I'll just keep going. Once upon a time, there was a young man, and this young man had only one job. He was to go out into the bush to hunt a sack full of pigeons for himself, his sister, and his mother. Now, fortunately for this young man, he was rather good at his job. And each day he'd go out into that bush, and each night he would come back with a sack full of birds. But one day, while this young man was out hunting, and while he had his heavy-laden bag full of pigeons behind his back, and while he was walking back home, he saw a hut in the bush that he had not noticed before. And inside of this hut, he could see through the window, was a beautiful young girl, young lady. And as he watched this young lady, he couldn't take his eyes off her. He watched as she scrubbed the dishes. He watched as she washed the laundry. He watched and watched for hours, days. He did not know, but all he knew was that he wanted this woman. So he stood outside of her door, and he did what he could do best, and he started to sing. He said, "I want you, baby. I need you, baby. Will you let me in? Won't you let me in? I need you, baby. I want you, baby. Won't you let me in? Please let me in." Well, this young woman heard this song, and there was nothing she could do but open the door for this man singing sweet songs for her. And when she let him in, I tell you, they spent many an hour loving on one another. And when their time was done, he couldn't help himself, but he opened up his sack of pigeons and selected the finest birds and laid them on the ground for her. Now this episode continued day after day. The young man, after hunting the pigeons in the bush, his sack full, would go to the young woman's door. He would sing his song of love. I love you, baby. He would really milk it. She would open up the door for him, and they would love for a little bit. And in his gratitude, he would leave her pigeons. Now, back at home, Mama and Sister had noticed that the sack of pigeons that the young man was bringing home was not nearly as full as it used to be. And at first they let it go. Perhaps he's just losing some of his prowess. But eventually, Mama and Sister began to murmur amongst themselves, natter between themselves, wondering, what is that boy doing? Where are all of our pigeons? What is he getting himself into? One night, Mama decided to take a few cupfuls of cold ash from the fireplace. She tipped the ash into the young man's sack and then snipped a little hole out of the bottom. The next morning, when the young man grabbed his sack to go out into the bush, little did he know that he left a trail of ash behind him. And little did he know that as he went into the bush to hunt, Mama was not far behind. And little did he know that as he carried his sack full of pigeons to the hut where his love lived, Mama was not far behind. And little did he know that Mama was watching as he sang out his heart, as the girl opened up the door and let him in. And little did he know that Mama was watching when their love-making was done, as he took pigeons out of the bag and left them on the girl's floor. Well, Mama wasn't having this. Mama did not like this. So she marched herself over to the village blacksmith, and she had him take a long iron rod, a hot, burning hot rod, and slip it down her throat to sear her vocal cords until her voice was sweet as honey. And then that Mama, with her honeyed voice, beat the boy to the young woman's hut, and there Mama began to sing. I want you, baby. I need you, baby. Won't you let me in? Please let me in. The young woman in the house noticed that the voice was not quite like her lover's, but how could she resist? And so she opened the door. And as soon as that Mama got into the house and saw her pigeons on the floor, she picked that girl up by her hair and cut off her head. She gathered up her pigeons and headed on home. A few hours later, the young man with another sack full of pigeons showed up at the young woman's door, opened up his mouth and began to sing, but of course there was no answer. He sang with all of the love within him, but yet she would not open the door, and so he let himself in, only to discover his love in two pieces. In his grief, his shock, his horror, he gathered up her head, grabbed her body, and took her out to the bush where he dug a grave 12 feet deep. He threw her into it, then cast his own body in after her, where he broke his neck and died. Now, back at home where Mama and Sister were feasting on the pigeons that they had left, well, they were nattering to one another, murmuring to one another, talking about all the trouble that boy had gotten himself into, nattering and nattering until they found themselves gnawing on one another's fingertips. Until they found themselves gnawing on one another's elbows and shoulders, gnawing on one another's toes and knees, hips and belly, gnawing at one another's hearts, until they had consumed one another completely. They were gone. And that's the end. The end, the end, the end.